to Through It All podcast with Aiden, Wolfe, and Seth Wieler. Today we've got, what are you guys' names again?
Ellen Verity.
And Corey Reed.
And how long have you guys been together in a relationship?
That's a terrible answer. Almost 3 years. In September, it'll be 3 years.
Okay. And you've been engaged for how long?
2 months.
Actually, as of today, 2 months.
Wow.
Well, congratulations.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's fun.
A little bit of context. Ellen Verity here, or Miss Verity from now on, because that just felt wrong. She's a teacher at our school here.
Mm-hmm. So let's start slowly with a very simple question. How did you meet?
There's this app called Bumble.
Oh.
Okay.
And I swiped right, as did he.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, like, online dating is not my favorite way to meet people, but at the same time, is like we were both having a bit of trouble meeting people in our personal lives, just because it's like there's not a whole lot of guys in the teaching profession, there's not a whole lot of girls in the software development, which I do, so just made it a little easier to find people.
I also lived in Waldheim. Mm-hmm. With a population of 1,000 people. Yeah, basically, like, there's not a lot of, and I mean, well, I guess to carry into this, into like the how we met, I think it comes in later, but it was September of 2020 when we met, and so the pandemic had been going on for 6 months, and so you literally could not do anything, and so the only way to meet people at that time really was online.
Yeah,
so
For sure.
yeah.
And what did the first couple times you did stuff together look like? Was it really awkward, or did you get along?
We got along, definitely. I feel like we wouldn't be at this point if we didn't get along.
Yeah.
But like, our first date, I was definitely nervous.
It's always a little awkward, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you don't know anything about the other person going into it. Mm-hmm. You've had like a couple of quick back and forths, and that's it. So, yeah, a little awkward. I mean, we also got caught in a rainstorm on our first date too, so that doesn't necessarily help.
Yeah, cut it short a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, it was like, yeah, we just hung out lots. We went for lots of walks. We went to Cranberry Flats. We went for coffee. That was like basically what our first few dates were.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you met on a dating app, and were you messaging on there for a while before you went out, or?
Not
no,
really.
like maybe at most 2 weeks, I would say. I think, because yeah, you were pretty quick to be like, we should go on a date, and I was like, okay, cool, let's do that.
Cool.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, well.
Okay, maybe not the best wording.
He could be a serial killer. He isn't. To my knowledge, he isn't. So
Corey, we need to go basement searching.
What? I used to live in a lot of basement streets, so there's that.
Okay.
All right. So what are some small little quirks that you guys appreciate about each other?
small quirks that I like about you.
Yeah.
Pressure's on.
I know.
Oh, boy.
That wasn't a question on here. I didn't prepare my answer for that. It was some of the small things we appreciate about each other.
I guess
That's the
that's what
wording
we
I
were
had.
meaning.
Oh, okay. Not small quirks. Quirks is different.
Okay, things are, if you'd rather answer small things.
Things.
Yeah.
That's
sorry.
a better one. That I prepared for.
Okay.
Go ahead.
He's just super thoughtful. It's like lots of the little things that it's like everyday things. Yeah, it's just like the little everyday things of like, I don't know, we look after each other in a way.
It's kind of funny how many of those things you don't think about when you've been in a relationship for a couple of years, because you just kind of get used to them always being there. But, you know, when we actually kind of stop to take a look at it, it's like there's a lot of just like little ways that we've gotten to know each other. Like we kind of know what each other like and what each other don't like at this point, and can kind of make little compromises along those lines. So like one thing is when we're going to bed, I like the blinds down, like all the way, completely shut sort of thing. No light coming in whatsoever. Whereas she'll sleep in broad daylight, no problem. So, and she generally prefers like the airflow coming in from the window. So we kind of have like a little bit of a back and forth there where it's like, we have like opposite conditions we like to sleep in, but we've found a compromise where it's like, all right, we'll leave it open for a little while. Usually she nods off, and then I can kind of shut everything and we're fine. So just like little compromises like that kind of help sometimes too.
Or like I'm the type of person who if I know I'm going to use something the next day, so like my example is always like when I make breakfast in the morning or when I'm making my lunch in the morning, I'm like, this cutting board, this knife, I'm going to use the exact same things to cut the apple that I cut today tomorrow. So I'm just going to leave them out.
Yeah.
Whereas Corey's like, put all of the things away. And so that's where we differ. It's like, I'd like to leave it out, but knowing that it bothers him and he's the one who's home all day, I'm like, okay, I'll put my cutting board away. I'll clean my knife, or I'll put it in the dishwasher, like wherever it needs to go, just because I know that it bothers him, even though it doesn't bother me. So it's like those little things where it's like, yeah, thoughtful to each other.
If you want a quirky one I just thought of now is that Verity has all kinds of little goofy sayings that she says, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like fresh ones.
Yeah. Super Gucci lit fam, all that stuff. Yeah.
I do have some good phrases.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That I-
really good.
Yes, thank you. I
They're endearing for a while.
I sing-song a lot of things, I will admit.
I can
Yes.
see that.
So how has your relationship changed essentially or matured since you met?
I think it's just been like because compared to the grand scheme of relationships, we're in a relatively new one.
Yeah.
And so in terms of that, it's like only having dated for not quite 3 years. We've sort of gone through like that honeymoon phase where it's like, I'm going to hang out with you all of the time, every minute of the day, which also did look different because I lived here in Waltheim, Corey lived in the city. And so then it's just changed from that. And we've just like grown more comfortable with one another. And it's less of like, I would say we're also more likely to say things like, okay, I don't like that, versus in the beginning, in like the honeymoon phase of a relationship, you're just like, I will tolerate this because I don't want to like make mistakes or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, what else?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like a relationship definitely evolves just as time goes on. Because right at the start, there's all that excitement. You know, you're excited to get to know the new person, and just like you get to have a lot of fun just like dating and going and doing stuff and that kind of thing, which is awesome. It's such a wonderful phase. But I kind of like the part that comes after even more, where you actually start to get to know the person on a personal level and kind of understand how the two of you can connect after that, and kind of like, you know, you get better at communicating with each other, which just like makes the relationship that much easier, and kind of like get to know each other on a deeper level as it goes too, which is really nice as well.
Yeah.
So, what challenges had you guys faced transitioning into this stage of engagement, I guess we can say? Because you guys have recently, in the last 2 months, made this transition.
I guess like the two biggest things in our relationship that have kind of challenged us is, one, we started dating during a pandemic, and two, we lived in different cities. I would say those are kind of the biggest, not that Waltheim's a city, two different locations. I think that was sort of the biggest thing, is it's like merging our lives together, I guess, within those two things. And so, because at the start, it was a lot of like, I would go and see Corey in the city, or because we both worked Monday to Friday jobs in places that are like 45 minutes ish apart. And so it took like a lot more time and planning for us to be able to like get together and hang out or like go on dates, just because of the time commitments we faced. And then, just I guess making decisions like, okay, when we move in together, where are we going to move in? Is that going to be, it ended up being my house. Mostly because I owned a house.
So she didn't want to live in my basement suite. I wonder why.
Oh, darn.
It was also like the tiniest thing.
There was one window just like slit size, and that
A
was about
single
it.
window.
Sort of
Yeah.
like a prison cell.
Yeah, honestly, it also it has zero temperature control. In summer, their air conditioning blasted into the basement, so you froze. But in winter, their heat blasted into the basement, so it was like 40 degrees down there.
Oh, no.
It was awful. Anyway, so we chose my house. But yeah, it was like logistics of like figuring that out, where we were going to live. And even now it's like progressing into, we're going to buy a house together. And it's like, okay, where's that house going to be? And just other things like that. What do you have to say?
I'm
Add to it.
I'm pretty happy with that answer. That was a good answer.
What challenges we face when transition? Yeah, moving in together I think moving in together was the biggest one,
Yeah,
and just like logistics with that.
just ends up being a lot of discussions to have because it's like you're two individuals with sometimes different goals and dreams and that kind of thing, and sometimes you have to talk a little bit in order to make those both into reality or kind of find a middle ground there.
And even not just the like physically moving in together, but once we are living together, it's like, how do you coexist as two people, as you said, with like different identities? And I've kind of already touched on it with like different, like lifestyles isn't the right word, but just like how our behavior in the house of how clean we like things or how organized we like things, just like figuring out what each other liked and then finding some middle ground between those two things, because we can't have like one of us happy and the other not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say like miscommunication could be a big factor in like a relationship falling apart?
Yeah, I would say absolutely.
Yeah, I think like one really common version of that is probably just like at the start, you don't really want to like disappoint the other person. You kind of want them to like you, right? Like you want the relationship to work out. So you have because you want the relationship to work out, sometimes you're a little bit afraid to communicate some of those things that you have where you're like, actually, I kind of want to do this, but like I'm afraid this other person's going to push back on this or they're not going to like this as much. So I feel like it can be very tempting to kind of settle a little bit, or like you just don't bring those things up soon enough. And then, if you don't bring those things up, then you're not necessarily like having those needs met or making progress towards that one goal that's actually really important to you. So I feel like that can kind of get you into a bit of a spiral where it's like you're still afraid to bring it up, but then you feel like the other person isn't appreciating the fact that you have that goal or that need or something like that. So there's a lot, like communication can be really easy or it can be really tough, kind of depending on.
But I would definitely say, yeah, like lack of communication would be a huge reason things go sideways.
Yeah. How important are shared goals for you guys?
Ooh, I think it depends on what the goals are, because it's like, if it's something that's going to drastically alter both of our lives, I feel like then there has to be like some common ground. But it's like, oh, that's a really good question. I have to think about that.
Yeah.
How?
It kind of like depends on the thing, right? Because it's like if one of you wants to have kids and the other one doesn't want to have kids, that's a pretty drastically different goal where it's like, one of you isn't going to be happy in that case, right? Whereas there's other things where it's like, say you both just have like career aspirations to some extent. Maybe you both want to be a manager somewhere or whatever. That's probably something that you can do fairly independently. And so it's like you don't have to worry as much about like how that plays out kind of thing. Like you can kind of handle that yourself. So there's like it kind of depends on what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Because it's like, and even if you talk about like if you both want to be managers, but it's like, if you also want to have kids and you both want to be managers and you both want to highlight your career, you have to like find some balance within there. If it's like, okay, if you're going to have a family, then who's going to help like with the kids kind of thing at some point in there. So it's like, yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I would say.
So I guess this is kind of interesting for you guys. Immediately after the pandemic, there was a huge spike in the number of divorces in Canada and around the world. How do you feel the pandemic affected your relationship, given that it kind of was the start?
I see. That's what when you gave us these, we read through that, we're like, did it? Because like we didn't know each other before the pandemic, so there was like no pre-pandemic Corey and Ellen to like consider. It was like our relationship formed throughout that. Like I'd say the only time that it really affected it was like when we had to do isolations. Like because of like contact tracing the schools, had to isolate a couple times, and so it was like we couldn't see each other then. But other than that, like that was all we knew, was how to date each other during the pandemic. That's just what it was.
Yeah, we were kind of lucky because we had like the opposite problem that a lot of couples had, where it's like a lot of couples had a lot of their personal space kind of removed because all of a sudden everybody's back at home. We're staying inside a lot more. Maybe even people lost their jobs, that kind of thing. So it's like in a lot of ways, it brought a lot of couples like closer together, and sometimes obviously that didn't go as well as we see.
Yeah.
So yeah, we kind of had the opposite problem where it's like it almost slowed down our relationship because we were still in the early dating phases, and so it's like it just slowed down how often we were able to see each other, or it like slowed down getting to know each other's family for sure.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. Is I think it took quite, because like both, I would say, our families were quite like worried about the pandemic, and so they were a little eerie of like going out and seeing other people. So it was quite a few months before we met either of our families. That was about the, like, that I would say maybe would be the only thing that really, because yeah, we didn't know any different at that time.
Let's talk a little bit about mindset. Like, do you have a I'm going to ask invasive questions and you can tell me to back off.
Okay.
But
Sure.
have either of you thought about the mindset itself, or is it just something that, well, you know, you want to try to make it work kind of thing? Or have you thought about, how do I need to change my mindset or make my mindset better so that this will work?
I feel like I thought about that before the relationship more than like during it. A lot of what we talk about kind of came back to like thoughtfulness, just kind of being willing to engage with your partner, you know, kind of willing to like get to know them, but also just kind of appreciate them for who they are. And yeah, just trying to, it's really tough to put yourself in another person's shoes sometimes, right? And I feel like that really helps when you're in a relationship, because when you can kind of try and be like, where is this person coming from? Just helps you understand them a little bit better. And I think that that helps build a stronger connection there. So yeah, thoughtfulness was kind of the word we thought of that encapsulated that pretty well. Just trying to remember, it's like, it kind of it like summarizes wanting the relationship to work, kind of like you said too. So there's definitely overlap there.
Yeah,
But
like the word I thought of, but like I also was like, oh, it's not quite the right word, was compromise. And I don't mean compromise in the sense of like, okay, I'll just like give in or give up on what I want, because I know that that's not what you want, but in the sense of like just making compromise in the small word is like, I don't know.
I definitely don't like the word compromise,
No,
because I
it
feel like if
sounds bad.
you're, well, it sounds bad, but it's like if you're compromising too much in the relationship, I just think that means that maybe you're not the best fit for each other, right?
Yes.
It's like,
yes, and
you
that's
have
why
to
the word's
compromise
not
on too
good.
much, then yeah.
There's healthy amount of compromise, but then there's the amount of compromise where it's just so much that there's
Yes,
almost
absolutely.
none of the original person.
Yeah.
Because it was like compromise on like the little things, like to let them in for a while. It's just like letting like the little things go, not like the major things that like you can't and shouldn't compromise on. Like, as you said before, you shouldn't compromise on like if you want kids but your partner doesn't, like that's not a compromise. That's a huge like life altering change.
That's a compromise that neither of you are happy with.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead to resentment. But it's things like, okay, when it's just, I don't know, little things. If you don't fully close the door, it's like, okay, I could let this bother me, or I could just like shut the door and it's fine. Like, that's what I mean by compromise. There's like little things.
Yeah.
But thoughtfulness, I think you're right that it goes back to thoughtfulness. If it's like, okay, we could have an argument about this, or we could just like not let it bother me or you, or vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah. One other thing I thought of with the word mindset is just, I think a big part of it is realizing that you as an individual are not perfect. And therefore, like, I think that just makes you so much more willing to come into the relationship and realize like, hey, I might be wrong here, or to kind of like work through the fights that you guys have, not as like, oh, this person's done this thing wrong and I'm upset at them for that. It kind of helps you come in on more even footing there. And I think that really helps as well. Just kind of realizing like, hey, I'm flawed, you're flawed. There's going to be stuff that comes up. And I think that just helps you be a little bit more cooperative when you're working through some of those things, as opposed to kind of like being at each other's throats.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're going to share with the audience some statistics regarding divorce and separation and ask you to respond. We're going to go through each one individually, except for the last two. Those ones we find are pretty similar statistics-wise. So let's just jump into it. People who have been divorced in the past are more likely to get divorced again. The percentage of divorces goes from 40 through 50% in the first marriage to about 60% in the second marriage.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that it's like if you've been divorced, you're more likely to get divorced again.
It's definitely really interesting to think about that in the context of like people our grandparents' age, right? I think of my grandparents, they're 80 some years old right now, been married for 60 years. And it's like back then there was a lot more stigma against getting divorced. So it was like, you know, you'd be kind of shunned by the community. And B, it was like less of an option, right? Partially because of gender roles and some other stuff, it's like there is a lot more codependence there in terms of like we don't necessarily have enough like money to survive if we break up, or you know, like we have 6 kids or something like that. I don't know, just like some of the stuff that would happen. So it's kind of interesting because it like feels like they didn't see it as much of an option. I don't really know where to go from that. I'm just like it's an like, interesting thing to think about. It is really
like why does it go up?
I think there's a lot of different reasons.
Like, a lot of people on this have talked about once you've done it once, you're quicker to do that again.
Yeah.
You see it as an option much quicker.
Yeah.
It got me out of my last problem. It'll do it again.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, is it? And it's like if you've because it's like once you've done something once, you're like, well, that wasn't that bad. I'll do it again. Well, hopefully that's not your attitude.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, no one ever goes into a relationship wanting to get divorced. No. Clearly.
Yeah, I just find
manipulative.
It interesting that it's like it just goes like the fact that it goes up is interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
We've already talked about the pandemic, but to bring it back, the number of divorces over recent years was in slight decline. So 2016 and 2017 both had 62,000, 2018 had 61,000, 2019 57,000, and then an extreme low of 43,000 in 2020, and a huge spike back up to over 71,000 in 2021. Do you think that this dip and spike is caused more so by simply the restrictions that were placed on like the court systems and how many people could be where, or is it also sort of people trying to make it work now that they've got more time to spend with their partner?
Ooh, that's actually a little column A, a little column B. Because I could definitely see that being a reason. Like, it would make sense, at least part of the numbers. Like, I think that huge drastic gap would have to do with, like, the number of people allowed to, like, go through the court system at that time. Mm-hmm. And then, like, everything opening back up again in 2021. But I think there's probably a lot of other factors going on for people. Like, yeah, so you're right. They all of a sudden, like, do get to spend time together. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people who all of a sudden found, like, joy in their relationship again if they weren't necessarily. Because a lot of what I heard people talk about is it's like before the pandemic, everyone was so busy. Like, if you had kids, like, every single night you and your partner were bringing different kids to different places and you, like, never saw anyone or, like, your family. Or all of a sudden then you had time to sit down because, like, you had to. You had nothing else that you could do. So you're like, let's have supper together. Let's, like, maybe it gave people an opportunity to rekindle relationships. But on the flip side, with all that time, you could also be like, you know what? I actually hate this person. Or, like, when you're forced to spend, like, if you, like, we both work, this is not an example, hi, I love you, but, like, we are, I mean, when the musical was on, I was working, like, 14-hour days, and you never saw me, and so it's like, if you had two couples that were both doing that, and you never saw each other, you had no reason to be like, oh, this actually isn't working, but then all of a sudden, when you're forced to, like, especially people who are living in, like, 1-bedroom apartments and you had no other room to go to, like, get away from them for 5 minutes. Like, I could see people really getting on each other's nerves, especially adding things like if someone lost their job, if they were going to lose housing, like, if any of those extreme things happened, it's like, ooh, that really adds stress to a relationship.
Yeah.
That was kind of the first place my mind went, to be honest. Like, I had a buddy who was in a relationship for like 4 or so years, and they had just moved in together, and it was right before COVID. And they lasted, I don't know, about 6 months or kind of thing. And they ended up breaking up because it was just like, yeah, they spent so much time together that they realized they weren't actually a great fit for each other. And so that's kind of more where my mind went with like being forced to spend more time together. I don't know, call me a pessimist, but
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
yeah.
It makes me think, I wonder if a lot of these relationships that ended because of the pandemic, or not because of the pandemic, but
The situation the pandemic put them in.
correlation, right? I wonder if part of that was the relationship getting stale, essentially. They can't do things.
Yeah, I could see that too.
I would agree with that too, just because like part of what sort of spices up your relationship is like having things going on in your own life that you can then share with your partner, right? So it's like with all that stuff kind of falling away for a while, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're just kind of like looking at the wall with each other. What's going on, you know? So
Twiddling our thumbs. It's like, yeah, what
Yeah.
do you talk about when literally nothing is going on?
it was like harder to be an interesting person too, right? So yeah, it's just like
Yeah, you're like, what do you do? I go for walks. Like, what are you gonna say?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a thing.
So almost 80% of divorced people end up getting remarried. And then 6% of those people who get divorced in the 80% get remarried to the same person.
I thought that was a hilarious statistic. I was like, you are paying to get divorced, but then you're gonna get back together.
they changed their mind.
The math does not math. Okay, but if you're breaking up for any reason, like so it's not just like, okay, we're dating, we have like, we're engaged now, I guess, we're not just dating.
Yeah.
But we have like, there's nothing that intertwines our life extensively together.
But other people have that, right?
Yes, but that's what I'm saying is like when we're not married, it's easy to break up. You're like, see ya, I'm just gonna go put my things in a box and leave, I guess. But when you're married, it's like, especially if you have kids, that is a whole entanglement you have to untangle. So how do you then go, I'm gonna pay someone, because lawyers are not cheap. I'm gonna pay someone to untangle our lives. Also, some of those probably in a really messy way. But now I'm actually going to get, like, I don't know. It just baffles me. Like, do they just get divorced really quick and then they're like, oh, we made a mistake?
Yeah. Or it's like, you know how you have that thing where you just like remember your ex fondly? It's like you can only remember the good stuff. You don't remember the bad stuff. I bet it's
guess.
just some of that.
Okay, what's the statistic for 80% of people get remarried, 6% get remarried to the same person? What percentage of those people get divorced for a second time?
We could not find that. Now I
That's
wanna
the
find
statistic
that.
I want to know.
We'll do a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Out of that 6%.
yeah. Like, the 80% of people getting remarried, that doesn't shock me.
Yeah.
I feel like most people want to be in a relationship usually, and it's like, okay, we just didn't find the right person on the first one or the seventh one. Hopefully you're not getting divorced 7 times, but like, how do you, like, you want to find someone that you want to spend your life with. Like, I feel like it's relatively, in my opinion, it would be boring to spend your life alone. I
mean,
think.
boring is an understatement.
Yeah, like, what are you, like, so the 80% getting remarried, not a shocker. 6% of those people getting back with the same person. I mean, I guess there's so many couples that like break up and get back together, but to go through like, oh yeah, wow.
Some people have described that as being a beautiful thing where you want to make it work, or, you know, would you agree or say horrible decision, don't do that?
Okay, wait, we should go 3, 2, 1. Camper and K.
Sure.
Right.
3, 2, 1. Horrible decision.
I don't feel that strongly about it.
What?
Like,
Oh, I think it's,
I feel like it's a nuanced thing. It probably depends on the case.
I guess. I'm more so on the camp of like horrible decision because
I can completely appreciate that instinct, but it's like really what ultimately matters is like, do both sides actually want to make the relationship work kind of thing? And so if there's a situation where they're both willing to do some serious work on themselves and they really want to make it work, then I think that that's fine. But it's like, I understand your reaction to that because it's
yes,
like
you make a good point.
the
but-
majority of the time I feel like that's more likely where it's like, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
So probably not a good
Okay,
idea.
I think you're right. Like, if you say the caveat of like, if those two people have gone and have done some like therapy individually together, all of the above, like, And because usually if you're getting divorced, there's a reason. And so
Right.
it's like, how did that reason change?
Yeah.
Did it change? Like if it was because someone was a jerk, what did they do to make themselves not a jerk? How did they work on themselves? Or if you had a big difference like between wanting kids and not wanting kids, and that's why you decided to get divorced because you didn't talk about that before you got married. Like, someone would have to change, I think, for it to be a beautiful thing again. But my gut reaction says terrible decision.
Huh, it's interesting.
That's fair.
Was there different answers to that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, there's been, yeah.
Am I the first one to say terrible decision?
Yes?
I think so.
Whoa!
But
That's interesting.
you guys come from different backgrounds from other people we've interviewed, so yeah,
Okay,
different cultures and all that.
that's fair.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that too a little bit, but we should keep moving so we
Okay.
get at least these done.
Yes.
Yeah. If a couple has children or a shared business, they're more likely to reach reconciliation.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think we touched on that a bit as we were talking about just like reasons couples might want to get back together, or like just things that kind of make it harder to untangle.
Those are a lot of things that complicate it. And so it's like, usually parents, yeah, like you're going to want to try and make it work for your kids. Because a lot of times I think people think of their kids first and they're like, okay, we don't want to break up our family. Let's try and make it work.
Right.
And then about reasons for divorce, we found statistics that violence or abuse accounts for 34% of all divorces in all age groups, and extramarital affairs makes up 27% all divorces in all age groups.
I think it's unfortunate, first of all. I don't feel like I can really comment on the violence or abuse situation that much because I don't really have much personal experience with that, or haven't even really heard about it. Well, I feel more. I feel more willing to have an opinion about that one because I feel like it's like less of a situation that I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I just wouldn't
That's
comment
very
on the violence or abuse one.
Yeah, I think I would hope that it's just interesting that the 34%, but it's like I hope everyone who's in a violent or an abusive situation is able to get out because those are not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, 27% make up. What is the other mathing? What's their other reasons? But I mean, it doesn't shock me. Like, I feel like affairs would be a huge reason that people would get divorced. Like, that's, yeah.
It goes back a little bit to what we talked about how exciting it is at the start of the relationship and how there's kind of that like fantasy around who the other person is. Like you never really fully get that back. You get a different kind of beauty in the later stages of the relationship, but like that fantasy is always kind of tempting, and especially when someone new comes along, I can completely understand how that would be tempting. So, like it still sucks, you know.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, if your relationship in the later stages, you're right, like it could get boring. And so then it's like, yeah, if someone's like, oh, I'm bored, I want the excitement again. Yeah.
Yep, or you're unhappy for some other need not being met, and then
You're
and
gonna
the
go
new
try and
exciting
find it
thing comes
somewhere
along.
else.
Yeah.
Even though if you truly love someone, I feel like you wouldn't like forsake your commitment and all that for excitement.
Yeah, you would hope not. Like,
I really respect that value, and I also really appreciate how tempting it can be, you know?
Yeah.
it's like,
like-
yeah.
You're right, but it is tough.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Like, yeah, you really no, you're definitely right. But some people just don't. I think there's some people who just don't see it that way. I wouldn't say I'm one of them. Like, I think, yeah, like you value and commit to your relationship. And it's like, if you love each other, then yeah. And if you don't love someone, then you probably should get divorced. Or work on your relationship so that you find it again. Well, hopefully you're gonna try and like make up your relationship first, and then if you're like, okay, I actually can't find this love anymore for whatever reason, then it's like, okay, because staying in a relationship just because it's easy if you don't love the other person is probably a little selfish. That's hard to say because if the other person loves you, I don't know, that's complicated.
It's all complicated at the
Yeah.
end of the day, hey?
Yes.
Would yourself from 10 years ago been able to see you now in a relationship with this other person?
No.
No?
10
No,
years
no.
ago. Me?
10 years ago is what, 18-ish?
Yeah,
right?
for us.
Yeah. I had never been on a date when I was 18. I had like no confidence
Neither
at
had
all.
I.
So yeah,
I.
exactly. Yeah. So it's amazing how much can change in 10
think-
years. But if I'm being
Yeah.
honest, 10 years ago, me, no, I wouldn't have thought I had a chance with anyone.
No, like I was a very different person 10 years ago. I feel like graduating high school, going to university, and just like being, I hate saying the real world. Like that's the worst. I hate when people say that, but it's just like, I feel like I've grown up a lot and changed who I am as a person in the last 10 years. And so I don't say the question again. I feel like I'm not answering it.
If you asked yourself from 10 years ago if they could see you now in a relationship with this person, like would they believe, yeah, I can see myself in that relationship?
Like, to put another spin on it, I think that you're the kind of person that I would have wanted to be in a relationship 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's not like a massive amount that I would say has changed about like what I was looking for. It's just, I just didn't have the confidence back then.
No, I feel like that would be the same answer. Is it's like, yeah, like I don't know what did I picture? Who did I picture myself with 10 years ago? I don't know. That's
10
a
years is a
really
long
tough question, actually. Like, I want to say yes, but like similar to what you said, like I was just a little awkward noodle when I was 18, like fresh out of high school. I didn't know how to adult. Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you changed a lot in your 20s, right?
Yeah.
So
You grow up a lot in your 20s. And I think you figure out more so what you're looking for. Like, I don't think if I had gone on Bumble 10 years ago, I think I would have swiped on very different people. Because you just, you change and what you're looking for changes.
yeah, it just takes time to find that all out, right?
What are your opinions on world beliefs and like religious beliefs? And do you think that two people in a relationship need to have the same values or the same religion or all that?
Ooh. Do they need to have the same value? I don't think they can have drastically different values. Like, I don't think you can be polarizing. But I think you can have very different ones. Like, people we know have quite, like, someone that we know is quite religious, their partner is, and they're not. They're more like, yep, but like, I'll go to church because it makes my partner happy, kind of thing. And they make it work.
Generally speaking, I think it's a lot easier if you do have that stuff in common.
Yeah.
Particularly the core values, because like, especially for us, it kind of that feeds into how we want to raise our kids, right? And so it's like there can be a lot of fights that'll probably come out of that if we're not on the same page about that kind of stuff. And so, I mean, do you absolutely have to? No, not necessarily, but I think it just makes a lot of things easier.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I still think they can't be polarizing, but they can be like slightly different.
Yeah.
Would be my answer. I'm curious what other people said.
Along roughly the same lines for the most part.
Yeah.
There's definitely that need to have the heart of the relationship. It can't have two different blood types working the same heart, if that makes sense.
That absolutely does make sense.
Good analogy.
Yeah, that is a great
Let's go.
analogy.
You come up with that on the spot?
Yeah, man.
But no, I
wow.
think that's totally
Give me
true.
some of that.
Like, yeah, that's exactly what we were saying. Is like, yeah, you can't be polar opposites, but you can be like, yeah, you have to be similar enough. Because I think otherwise, then when you have to go and make big decisions, those would really, like, you're not going to come to the same agreement when it's a huge decision.
Right.
How can we flip it on you?
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Have you answered this podcast? Yeah, I don't know if you guys have any other questions for us. I hope we've answered them well.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate you guys definitely have a different view on these questions than the other people we've interviewed, and I really appreciate that.
Nice. No, it was nice because the first time you sent them to us, admit it to the podcast. We've already gone through these questions before with each other. Shh. But it was fun to go through the questions with each other. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting directions you could take them to. So I felt like they were very interesting questions to kind of think about and answer. So kudos to you guys for coming up with
Thank
them.
you.
And we want to thank Corey for deciding to actually be a part of this. He at first was very much, why would you share your personal life with your student?
Yeah, I told him you said that.
I'm
Sorry.
somehow not surprised that made it around,
Yeah.
but I'm a little shy. So
Oh, that's totally fair.
You had some good, very thoughtful answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your voice should be heard.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys taking time to join us.
Yeah, but thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks
for joining us.
I would clap again, but that's gonna throw off the sound.
All right.
I don't know how to do an outro. We'd never do the outro as well.
2-1
fair enough.
outro.
Yeah.
But
The that's
kind of
but better. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
That
Yeah.
sound that you hear in podcasts. There's the button.
Oh yeah, the sound effects.
Yeah.
That's like radio stuff, hey?
Yeah.
I think podcasts are a little bit better than that sometimes.